Okay, hello to my students and to my friends on YouTube and Substack. This is going to be a quick one today, this morning, and it's going to be unscripted, so please bear with me. But I'm excited about this thing that I just found. And I think that this will be of interest not only to my students, but also to people who are interested in lifelong learning. And that is something that I think is really shown by what I discovered today. So let me tell you a little story. It's early Saturday morning, and I've been listening to some things on YouTube as I've been making and eating my breakfast. I often do that. I'll put in some earbuds and I'll just listen to things when I'm walking or when I'm doing other things. And that way I get to kind of keep up with not only the news, but also, what other people are doing in spaces that I'm interested in. And in this case, I was listening to Stefan Milo. I think he pronounces it Milo. I think he's the one that pronounces it Milo, and Minuteman pronounces his first name Milo. I think that's right. In any case, Stefan Milo. I subscribed to his channel, and he had a video that he posted just 9 days ago called Human Evolution Questions That Keep Me Up at Night. And this particular one, and the thumbnail for this one, said something about Beringia and said something about earlier than Homo sapien humans possibly being in Beringia. And that always interests me. And so I was listening to that while I was eating breakfast in the kitchen back there. And I wasn't even watching the screen. I was just listening on the earbud. And Stefan started talking about problems with the Cerruti mastodon site, which I thought were very insightful and useful. But then he started talking about a site that is somewhere between 200 and 400,000 years old in Siberia at a latitude of about 61 degrees, which is very high, almost in the Arctic Circle. And so Stefan said that he was surprised that this is kind of on the same level, on the same latitude as most of Alaska. And then he started talking about Beringia. Now, I've always been a big fan of Beringia. I've always been a big proponent of calling it a land and not a land bridge. And my logic for that was that during the last ice age, the last glacial maximum, when the ancestors of Native Americans would have lived there and then later would have crossed into North America from there, it was as wide as Alaska, and it lasted for probably between 10 and 15,000 years, which is 2 to 3 times longer than all of recorded history. So just on that basis, I think it qualifies to be a place and not just a bridge, which normally we think of as something that's narrow and temporary and that people only use to get from one place to another. But the thing that blew my mind was that Stefan said that for 80% of the last million plus years, this land, Beringia, has been exposed. And that was something that I had never even really considered. And so, being the responsible archaeologist, historian that he is, Stefan flashed an image on the screen of an article by someone named Scott Elias on the National Park Service page called Beringia, Lost World of the Ice Age. And I went and I looked at that. And then, as I typically do, and this will also be kind of a lesson in useful things that AI can do for us, I went to SuperGrok and I asked it a question. And what I said to SuperGrok was, in an article on the NPS website called Beringia, the Lost World of the Ice Age, Scott Elias said that Beringia has existed for perhaps 80% of the last million years. Has this statement been criticized, or have other experts agreed with this assessment? And Grok thought about this for the better part of 4 minutes, and then it came up with this answer. Grok said, the statement by Scott Elias in the NPS article has not been directly criticized in scientific literature or expert discussions based on available sources. Instead, it aligns with the broader consensus among paleoclimatologists and geologists that the Bering Land Bridge was exposed during most glacial periods over the Pleistocene, the last approximately 2.58 million years, when sea levels frequently dropped sufficiently, typically by 40 to 50 meters or more, due to ice sheet growth. For context on agreement, bullet 1, multiple sources, including Wikipedia's Beringia entry and NPS resources, describe the land bridge forming repeatedly during glacial maxima across the Quaternary period, corresponding to lowered sea levels for extended durations in each about 41,000 year earlier Pleistocene or 100,000 year later Pleistocene cycle. Second bullet. Glacial periods dominate these cycles, often lasting 80 to 90% of each, with interglacials, when the bridge submerged, being shorter, about 10 to 20% of the cycle. Given that sea levels needed to drop only 42 to 50 meters for exposure, based on Bering Strait bathymetry, the bridge likely existed for a substantial fraction of time, consistent with Elias's about 80% estimate over the last million years, though exact percentages are not commonly calculated in literature. Third bullet. Experts like those in PNAS studies, that is, on the last bridge formation, about 35,700 to 11,000 years ago, and USGS/NPS reports focus on refining timings for specific cycles, but do not contradict the long-term pattern of recurrent exposure. Reconstructions from sea level proxies, that is, oxygen isotope records, support frequent low stands below about 50 meters during the last million years, with at least 4 major drops exceeding about 100 meters in the past 600,000 years alone. It concludes, overall, Elias's assessment reflects a standard view in paleoecology, emphasizing Beringia's role as a persistent Ice Age feature rather than a brief anomaly. So that seems to be a pretty well-written response, which gave me the information that I was looking for and, to my satisfaction, seems to corroborate what Scott Elias had said and what Stefan had reported. Now, the even better part of this is that SuperGrok gave me 56 web pages that I could look at to get more information. And this is one of the things that I have found the most interesting and the most useful so far about my interactions with Grok, which right now is the AI that I guess I'm preferring. The documentation and the sources that it cites and the links to live websites that I can use myself and then that I can make available to my readers or viewers or students is tremendous. I am really loving it. So I would submit this as a really useful thing that can be done with AI in a way that lifelong learners and my own students could use AI productively and really legitimately. And so I hope that people will get some encouragement from this and will maybe get excited about digging into some of the things that interest them. And I think this also proves that lifelong learning is a thing. I was already a huge fan of Beringia, and this was something that I didn't know. So I think that really makes the case for the efficacy of continuing to be open to new information. So I hope you found that a little bit interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again very soon.